All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Cash Flow Diary podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you are here today because what it comes down to is when you and I are out there building our cash flow in various different ways, there are many different strategies, many different ways to go out there and skin that cat. And many of you know, if you've been following us for any length of time, about 2.5 years, maybe almost 3 years ago now, we made a major shift. The shift from the traditional landlord way all the way over to what some would call the Airbnb way. You guys know I like the word short-term rentals, but most importantly, today's guest spends a significant amount of time consulting in the space of hospitality, and he has written a book entitled The Airbnb Way, 5 leadership lessons for igniting growth through loyalty, community, and belonging. These are topics and things that all of us as short-term rental entrepreneurs must understand on deeper levels. And it's because, as I've said before and say again, it's not just about the real estate, but the experience at the piece of real estate that we have to pay attention to. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's what we're going to do today. We have with us none other than Dr. Joseph Michelli, and he is going to share with us, well, the Airbnb way in a sense. But most importantly, you and I, our job is to listen closely, take some notes, and make sure that when we have the opportunity, such as right now, to pay attention, to gain some insight into our own business, that we do exactly that and be prepared to take action. So, with that being said, let's get ready to welcome, love, and learn from Dr. Joseph Michelli. How you doing?
I am so excited to be here. I am a fan of yours. You are creating wealth. You're this incredible font of information, and you give people real tools to do it. So are you kidding me? I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
We do our best at everything that we try to do. Now, this being the first time that you're here, I have to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody else the first time that they're here. You ready?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes, like Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, Incredible Hulk, etc. You get the idea. Because I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. For example, as a superhero, I can imagine myself going around town using our products and services, saving people one sale at a time. And yet, just like a superhero, the entrepreneurs have a beginning. There's a time where Spider-Man was just a kid going to school, doing his thing, taking photos, and then one day decides, after being bit by a spider, that he's got superhuman abilities and he has to choose whether to use them for good or for evil. So my question to you is rather simple. Before all of your books, the Starbucks Experience, for example, or the New Gold Standard, and even the new one, the Airbnb Way, before becoming a doctor, but before everything that everyone knows you for today, especially in the hospitality industry, what we want to know is, who is Joseph Michelli?
Wow, he's just this kid who was raised in a small town in Colorado, who was loved on seriously by his parents, and they told him that the responsibility of being raised in this family was that you were going to give more to the world than you took, and if you did it, the world would give more to you than you could ever ask for. And that's pretty much the bottom line for me.
Interesting. So that was like at the dinner table, they said you were going to make sure that you contribute. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and any day you didn't, there was a little bit of a discussion about that too.
I can only imagine. So take us on this journey, if you will. How do we go from those dinner table conversations, learning to contribute, all the way to writing multiple books, to consulting into the hospitality industry?
Well, there have been some twists and turns in there where, I got a little bigger than my britches, I think. When I got into a doctorate program, it was pretty mind-blowing. Nobody in my family had ever, graduated from from college. Only one had graduated from high school. So, it was one of those things where when I finally got accepted into graduate school, I really started thinking I was something. And was consulting quite a bit in this space. And I was really pretty focused on my own success for a period there. Youth will do that, I think, sometimes. And then I got out of graduate school, and at some point I started to realize this isn't about me at all. It's really
Mm.
about telling the stories of the clients that I've worked with, and that just became a ticket for success. So as I would work with a Johnny Yokoyama at the Pike Place Fish Market in Seattle, and then be able to tell the story of how he created this amazingly engaging experience, 1,400 square feet of retail space, and they're throwing fish, and people are coming and checking it out, and he just was an amazing guy, and he just reminded me a lot of my dad. So in ultimately, I think that helped me start writing books about other people. And so my books have been about Howard Schultz and what he's done at Starbucks, or Horst Schulze and what he did at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company. And in the process, I've continued to consult for other businesses and write books about them as well.
Interesting. So it I think there's an interesting switch or journey inside of understanding that it was, well, it wasn't about you, but that you were able to find even greater success, would you say, by telling the story of others?
Oh, amen. I think, and I see that in kind of your work. A lot of the art of this is to take great principles and celebrate the victories of the people that you work with and other people in the world that are inspiring. And so, yeah, that's been my journey as well. And it's been so amazing because the world's hungry, I think, for uplifting, positive leadership
Mm.
tools that enable people to experience their own greatness.
Okay, so I'm going to hang right there. Tools that enable people to experience their own greatness. That's a lot about how I feel when it comes to, well, yes, real estate in general, but very specifically the whole short-term rental industry, and how specific companies like Airbnb and others have come together because of technology, have unlocked this potential, which I believe now changes the way that real estate can be used to create it in and have it become, exactly like you said, a tool that allows others to experience their own greatness. Is that what inspired you to even go down this path?
Absolutely. So imagine that in 2008, I'm sitting around with the executives of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, and we're debating what is hospitality in 2008.
Hmm.
And literally, that debate goes like this: could we possibly serve a beer to someone in a Ritz-Carlton in a bottle? We could we possibly do that? Because the convention is you have to serve it in a glass, and
Yeah.
what does this mean, and how will our established guests experience this, right? So that's my world of 2008. Well, while I'm doing that, Brian Chesky and
Mm-hmm.
Joe Gebby are trying to make rent in San Francisco, and they're renting out, their spare room for $80 and three air mattresses, and giving the guests, uncooked Pop Tarts as part of the breakfast element of the whole thing, right? And 10 years later, fast forward 10 years later, and here we are in a world where short-term rentals has blown up.
Mm-hmm.
Airbnb is certainly a point in that journey. And Airbnb's valuation now at about 11 years out is some $38 billion. That's probably what they're going to be getting as they go public next year. So if you think about that, right, the Ritz Carlton, which is now part of the Marriott, is that whole Marriott thing is valued at about $41 billion. And they own a lot of real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And here's this company called Airbnb with a 10-year journey that's approximating the same valuation. And I think they did it largely because they created a platform, a marketplace that enabled people to do the very thing that you just talked about, was to take their most significant asset or invest in a significant asset that was going to unlock and open up all kinds of potential. Everything from solving housing insecurity for seniors to creating full on businesses and allied businesses in the marketplace today. It's really exciting.
I like how you put the solving housing insecurity, because that there is a significant challenge in the older population to still afford, just common everyday living. And by the way, uncooked Pop Tarts are just awesome. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm going to go with you on that. I'm not going to go test it. Okay.
Now, when it comes down to it, so then let me ask this question then. Since in 2008 you were considering it, what is hospitality?
Well, hospitality is what Chip Conley calls it, in my opinion. I love Chip, and Chip has been an influencer to, first he had Joie de Vivre in his own hotel sector. He's written great books
Mm-hmm.
like Peak, how Maslow got his mojo, or how businesses get their mojo from Maslow, so he calls it hospitality is service with heart. And I think that's very similar to what Danny Meyer, who's the great restaurateur from New York, talks about as enlightened hospitality. For me, it is taking the basics of service, which is get it right, make it right, be responsive, act with urgency, consistency of your deliverables, all those kind of things, and then adding on to it this understanding of human needs that go beyond transaction or getting safety from a space. It's not about accommodations. It's about an emotional experience where somebody cared for me by providing a great space to be in and cared about me as an individual human being roaming around the planet, sometimes feeling alone in unfamiliar environments.
That it's interesting you say that, because as we have continued to practice and train and teach many other people in this space, one of the things that we often share with people is it's not to focus so much on the piece of real estate, whether it's a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and does it have a shower and all this other stuff, but focus more on the experience that you're creating for the person that you're targeting to stay there. It sounds like you're saying something similar.
Oh, amen. And I mean, you've got to get the housing right, right? And you have to, that's table stakes though. That's,
right.
Okay, that fits my need set, functionally. But when you get right down to it, the decision to go and travel is an imaginative world out there that we want to believe that when we go there, somebody's going to, quite unquote, quote, give a damn about us while we were there. And I think that factor is missing from a lot of corporatized play in hospitality. I just don't feel that when I check into a hotel at X name brand, right? I mean, that person at the front desk is just transacting the business of getting my credit card and handing me a room key. And that's about the level of care they have. And they'll do that again for the next person in line without any sense of my unique humanness.
So with that being said, then based upon that, it would sound like there's room from your perspective for the hotels and the Airbnbs of the world, if you will, to coexist.
Well, yeah, and I think the hotels who initially would have said, "Hey, that's just a trend. It's a fad. People have been, home sharing forever. It's not going to last. It's a small marginal percentage of the population." They now are emulating the short-term rental industry, right? They're trying to create arms and adjacent product lines that enable them to try to reach into that market.
Yeah, we've noticed. So, I mean, but it's one of those things that we have to deal with and just understand that when you're doing something that's correct or that the marketplace desires, any good entrepreneur would begin to try to mimic and imitate and do those things. So it's not that I'm surprised, but at the same time, I wonder if they even have the capacity to actually compete. I think our uniqueness is the fact that our size is so, we'll say, small relative to theirs, that there's always this level of service that or just touch that we'll be able to create that they would not. Would you agree, disagree? What do you think?
I totally think so. I mean, there are some brands that do a better job of creating a culture of hospitality inside of a chain, but I think about the challenge of that, right?
Right.
Versus taking responsibility for yourself if you're a solopreneur, or helping a small team of people have an aligned vision of what you want people to feel every time they book in your short-term rental. That's a lot easier lift. And it is a differentiator. It is the nimbleness of a smaller business. And it is something that I tell small business owners exploit all the time. Look, I've written books about Starbucks. Starbucks is a mega behemoth experience, but normally it gets beaten out by a very local, kitschy coffee shop. And in fact, local kitschy coffee shops are more prominent than they've ever been before, thanks to the Starbucks of the world. So it comes down to knowing your lane and your strengths. And if you are a smaller player in the short-term rental business, you should be a more personal player than any large provider of accommodation services.
Yeah, I absolutely like that. Now, in the process of creating the book, The Airbnb Way, you specifically highlight 5 leadership lessons. And I'm curious to hear, because one of the things that's always amazed me is, similar to what you were referring to, Airbnb relative to the industry they're a baby, they're new. And yet somehow they've managed to make something massive in such a short period of time that literally rivals these established companies that have been around for quite some time and playing this game a significantly longer. I mean, were they just asleep at the wheel? What happened?
Well, I think they did what people who turn to you do. I mean, they went to thought leaders in their space, right? And they talked to the Tony Hsiehs of the world. So I worked with
Hmm.
Tony in the Zappos Experience book. He's
Mm-hmm.
the CEO of Zappos, and so you're looking at founders of Airbnb who would go and talk with people like Tony Hsieh and say, "Help us figure out how do we dial up a culture where we get more from our people than we would if we just were,
Mm-hmm.
treating them poorly and paying them well." And so, and so they turn to experts like you who, open up the idea of cash flow gaming. They looked for people who had expertise and they sought them out as mentors and they relied on them and they took the best of them and they incorporated. They were very humble in what they didn't know. And if you think about it, it's hard
Hmm.
for founders of a company to stay through the first 10 years of that company and steer it into the position that these founders have done. So anyway, it happens, but I think as a lot of it is a reflection of one of the great leadership lessons of all time is practice the humility of seeking out information from people who know more.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that. Now, in but also in the title you mentioned igniting growth through loyalty, community, and belonging. How does those three components ignite growth, and how might say a smaller entrepreneur in the short-term rental game leverage that?
Well, I'll start with community, and I
Okay.
think that this is, it's part of that notion of getting insights from somebody else is part of seeking community, like a thought leadership community that you join to. But other parts of the community is realizing that great success in business occurs when we help other people be successful with our businesses. So, a lot of the exciting things to me in Airbnb is not only just what the hosts do, but how hosts create job opportunities, how hosts
Mm.
partner with others in the community, maybe restaurateurs, to create flows and accesses to those businesses, and how then those restaurateurs cross refer back to those Airbnbs in terms of places to stay in the future. So for me, a lot of community is your peers, getting support, best practices, and ideas, and really helping mobilize a like-minded group of people. So for Airbnb, one of the things that they've done really well, and I was just with a host group in Portland last week, and they're kind of agnostic. They're VRBOs and they're Airbnbs, and they're on all the platforms. But what they said is the thing that they liked a lot about Airbnb was how much they organized them to fight on behalf of short-term rental rights. So part of the activation of this group of people was we have a common enemy, and that's people who are so hell bent on regulation that they sometimes think past the importance of maintaining people's right to leverage their own property for a shared good. So I think that's part of what I've talked about with regard to community. I can gladly get into belonging and trust and all those other things later if you'd like, but community is a starting point, I think, for them.
Well, okay, so and I get the community amongst us as operators, and I get the community amongst how the entrepreneurs can also, uh, you know, garner that community sense of feelings with the other small business owners in their area. Where I've struggled, admittedly, is how to create same said community or something like it with the people who actually stay with us. That's something that seems elusive. How to create, and maybe the word isn't community, maybe that's more loyalty, but I don't really know. But either way, looking for ways to do that have so far thus far eluded me.
Yeah, no, and I don't think that, I write too much about how they build a community between hosts and guests. I think they have created loyalty to the brand of Airbnb through empowering and encouraging the hosts to aspire to that concept of belonging. So I'm kind of shifting gears a bit, but
Mm-hmm.
at some level, loyalty comes from helping guests feel something. And in
Hmm.
Airbnb's case, that they belong anywhere. And so if hosts own that at some level, and you as a host should try to create something that's totally branded to you, but it still should be respectful of the fact that it you should create belonging because that's what Airbnb is selling as part of the experience. And if you do that, you should be driving loyalty back to the Airbnb platform, which then in theory should create this community of buyers that aren't just one and done transactors, and that just keeps the revenue coming into you through the traffic and through your successes in the way you're reviewed by your guests.
Understood. And there are yet also in the space a couple of specific groups who have felt like they specifically don't belong, whether that be the LGBTQ, African American, etc. Because there have been a number of instances where hosts have, we'll say, been less than hospitable to certain groups, but yet how would one deal with something like that and still create that feeling?
Why, and I think, well, first off, that is, as I've been in this space, one of the things that's become very clear to me is that all the worst of humanity is out there, but mostly the best of humanity is existent in the host community.
Agreed.
The ones who don't, and the ones who absolutely are hell bent to live their prejudices and not welcome people such that there is a world where anyone can belong anywhere. Those hosts, I think two things have happened. Airbnb has made some mistakes. I mean, without a doubt, oftentimes inadvertent. The notion of trying to give you the opportunity to see who was going to be coming to your house if you were going to be sharing a space, and then make a decision based on that because it is your, giving up of your space and your safety to some other human being. That was well intentioned, but what it came down to is it caused prejudice, because I could look at you and I go, hey, Jay may have a slightly different skin color than I do, and thus all my internal prejudices might come to play, and I'm going to deny you access to the booking. Well, that's been corrected, right? I mean, that may have languished too long, but it's not the way the world works anymore because there's been a correction. And we take this on in the book, they get wind that people are happily renting spaces on Airbnb so they can attend some racist rally somewhere. Those bookings get canceled, and the people who are trying to book them and who are posting their social media posts about how excited they are to all commune together in this racist action, they're banned for life from the platform. So I think you try to police this by managing the one-offs. But by that time, again, people have been injured, and it's kind of sad. The other way to police it is to do something so draconian that it really impairs the ability of people who would never demonstrate those kind of prejudices from being able to operate their business efficiently. So it's a terrible tension, I think, that exists. But personally, I haven't been burned by it, so I might have a different feeling if I were the subject of this. But to the degree that I've been able to evaluate it, I think there's been right-spirited corrective actions whenever this has surfaced.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and we've experienced it in various different forms. The the thing that I often like, and sometimes it's a little confusing, specifically as a operator, is that when something like what you're describing happens, we'll get a message. We won't get an explanation. We'll get a message that says, hey, this person is no longer a part of the platform. We're like, okay, don't know what happened, but glad you're looking out in some way, shape, or form. So that's good. Now, back to the topic, though, when it comes to the concept of, you were mentioning regulation, et cetera, and overstepping of bounds, et cetera. I'm of the opinion that, I think more regulation is absolutely needed to some degree, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be, overly burdensome, because as you mentioned, one of the things that I personally get satisfaction of is the number of jobs that, we create. It's something that I personally like to track. I literally track that we easily on a monthly basis, I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 to $60,000 goes back out into the community just from the job creation that our small little organization creates from all the people that we're hosting. But regulation has a tendency to possibly hurt that in some way. What have you been able to see? I mean, you've witnessed this industry mature. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about what you've seen or seeing.
Well, I think it's been the wild, wild west, right? Like,
You got that right.
nobody really expected it to go this crazy, and now we got all these gunslingers, and now we got to get the marshal in town. I do see the importance of taking care of being responsible hosts. So, I think there is a need to police irresponsible hosting, people who don't
Hmm.
take consideration to what it needs to be a neighbor to other people and to run a business in a neighborhood. So I'm all over that. I'm all over making sure people pay their taxes as business owners,
Hmm.
right? I do, everybody else should. The notion that you can get away with, doing this somehow in a non, and not own your responsibility to taxation for the roads that get people to your house are kind of silly. But what I do get a little bit freaked out about is when there's this overreach, this crazy sort of concept of you don't have the right to do that with your house, right?
Hmm.
It just seems like a property rights issue. And it really is. If you're irresponsible, you should be denied the right. But the concept of having the right to use your house once you're paying for this material property, I think there's responsible use law, and that's
Oh,
about where I go. But the absolute banning of
right.
Airbnb or any short-term rental because conceptually it's wrong for a community. That's the stuff that I think is troublesome to me because it denies people not only being able to stay in their homes potentially, but it also denies these businesses that do create jobs, and not only in the direct job creation that you're talking about, but all those adjacent jobs for people who clean the spaces
Yep.
and property manage the
Yep.
spaces and any number of other allied stuff. It's crazy how much industry has been created, cottage industry has been created around short-term rentals.
I'm telling you, our maintenance bill continues to get higher and higher. It's a whole new world. I've never had to organize it and create a system around organizing so many, loose doorknobs and small little things of that nature. But yeah, it definitely adds up as the number of reservations you're handling on a monthly basis grows. But at the same
Oh,
time,
well, cry me a river, Jay. Jeez, oh,
I have no way complaining. I was
you stop
surprised.
eating so many uncooked Pop Tarts,
Hey,
you'd
dude,
have the revenue to handle your. I'm sorry, you're making so much money. Of course, it's going to cost you to put a doorknob in.
I,
I'll be quiet.
I just never, it never even occurred to me that was a thing until you have so many of them going. You're just like, wow, okay, this is something we have to have a system around. And yet,
Yeah.
but now because of that system, someone else has, a very steady set of jobs to do. Whereas before, their business may have been like looking for work all the time,
Yep.
and now
Yep.
that's just not the case. And I like it a lot.
Yeah.
So now, as you've been able to consult and see, when it comes down to the idea of this concept and the Airbnb way and leadership through loyalty, community, and belonging, what do you see as a potential pitfall to that growth in some way, shape, or form?
Well, I mean, regulation is certainly one. I
Sure.
think this going public thing is going to be interesting to see how it
Mm,
all plays out
mm,
because,
mm.
the more money you take from the bigger the player, the more demand for profit there is. And so, I think that can always change the landscape of any business. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I think market share is always an issue for a brand like Airbnb. I mean, how can the fast followers can they do enough of the market share pull from the brand? Scandal, incidents that get high publicity anywhere in the world and attaches your brand name on it. I mean, we face this at Starbucks when the thing that I experienced with Starbucks. It's a lot more exciting to have a protest outside of a Starbucks store than it was to have it in the aisle of a supermarket in the coffee department. It's just certain brands become big targets for the entire industry. So I think those are all challenges for Airbnb going forward.
Understood. For those that have listened this far and want to find out more about the Airbnb way and possibly even some of the other books that you've authored, what's going to be the best way for them to track you down and find out what you got going on?
Well, I hope they don't track me down too hard, but you can find me at airbnbway.com. Airbnbway.com. There's no the. The book has a the. It's just airbnbway.com. And if you go there, the thing we're excited about is that you don't have to buy anything. You can check out the book if you're interested, but you can enter a contest that's 4 days, 3 nights in San Francisco. It's my team sending you out there from anywhere in the continental United States, and then Airbnb is kind enough to put you up in some digs in San Francisco, and also give you a tour of the Airbnb headquarters. So it could be a fun thing. Just go to airbnbway.com and learn more about the book. No purchase necessary.
Excellent. That's definitely a trip I'm open to for sure. Now, as we wind down, I've got a final question for you because I'm curious to hear your answer. People who have been listening, they've made a journey, with us today. Some of them may have just been considering getting started. Others have already been started, but at some point, they're now at that what I like to call the precipice of decision. That's that point where they're like, okay, that's it. I'm going to do something. And like I know, that when we as humans reach that point, we often have a companion, and that companion comes in the form of a voice. And it's a voice that reminds us of, well, why it won't work, how it didn't work last time, and what on earth do you think you're doing anyway, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And for some people, they're even related to that voice. So my question to you is as follows. Let's pretend that this time it's going to be different. This time they're actually going to follow through. They're going to do exactly what you suggest, and they're going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours. What would you suggest that they do?
I think first and foremost, you have to say, I have something of value to create in the world, and I am going to define that value so clearly. And I want to see the customers who are going to buy what I'm creating. I want to just imagine what that market looks like. So for me, it's always a matter of understanding the market, spend some time trying to realize why they should book in your space or buy whatever product you're thinking about getting involved in. And then once you've assessed your market, really try to articulate what unique value you're going to bring to it. Because business is not as complicated as we make it. We have to have something of value. We have to have the people who are interested in that value. We have to get the message out about our product. And then we have to be able to deliver that value in the marketplace in a fiscally responsible way so that we can sustain the business long term. Just go and start and think about those 5 dimensions of successful business.
I love it. I definitely appreciate, again, the work that you have done, the work that you are doing, and the insight that you bring to the industry that helps those of us who are just now entering or learning to mature our own organizations and make that happen. And just let me be the first to say thanks for taking the time to invest your knowledge, your wisdom, and your insight here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
All right, let me be the first to say I will try the uncooked Pop-Tarts, but only if we're sitting across the table from each other.
We got to make that happen. I'm telling you, they're great.
All right. Thanks, Jay.
No problem. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean? Well, that means get over to the airbnbway.com. One, because you probably want a trip to San Francisco and see the Airbnb headquarters anyway. But more importantly, understanding how you can lead your organization and grow it through loyalty, through, understanding your customer and making sure that your guests have the absolute best experience possible. Well, that just makes dollars and cents. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time. And we're clear, sir.
Thank you, Jay.
No problem.
Have a fabulous day. I'm going to hit you up in 2 years if I haven't had the Pop-Tarts in between, because I'll be doing a book about Godiva in 2021, so I'll try to see if I can get it on your show to talk about chocolate.
I love chocolate too. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.
All right, man. Take care. Bye.